On the morning of August 19th, Chinese President Xi Jinping welcomed General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam To Lam to Beijing. There was nothing special about this meeting, but it attracted special attention from the outside world. This is because Xi Jinping has not appeared in public for 3 weeks since he met with East Timor President José Ramos-Horta and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni on July 29th. This has broken his record for the longest period of invisibility. During this period, China's official media did not provide any particular explanation. In the past 3 weeks, various rumors have spread on the internet, including rumors that Xi Jinping is ill, has suffered a stroke, and even suffered a coup during the Beijing meeting in early August. In an interview with Voice of America, Zhuang Jiaying, associate professor of the Department of Political Science at the National University of Singapore, analyzed that the key to the continued rumors is that Xi Jinping's one-man dictatorship and highly centralized governance style have made China's political situation increasingly lack transparency. Without real information, rumors have become a feature of Chinese officialdom. Rumors often become a reality, so some people call rumors prophecies. China's state-run media CCTV reported live that in order to welcome To Lam's motorcade, strict controls were implemented around Beijing's Tiananmen Square. When To Lam arrived at the Great Hall of the People, in addition to Chinese children lining up to welcome him, Xi Jinping also accompanied him to review the honor guard of the 3 armed forces. But what is strange is that news from Taiwan's United Daily News stated that although CCTVs broadcast outside the Great Hall of the People switched to different angles, the whole process was shot with a long shot and few close-up images of Xi Jinping or To Lam, whether it was the conversation between the two sides in the Great Hall or the singing ceremony together, were all long shots or empty shots. Obviously, there was a professional need for distance photography, which once again triggered discussions about Xi Jinping's health. Gao Yu, a senior reporter in Beijing, posted a post on X questioning that the 3.5-minute live broadcast did not have a close-up shot. He's so small that he can't even see clearly with a magnifying glass. She also said Xi Jinping's voice was deeper and slower than before. Wang Dan, the leader of the June 4th student movement in the US, also posted on X, "Can any expert who understands China's new regulations come out and explain why there is such a video processing technique?" Although the video material later released by the Associated Press and other media included close-up photos of Xi and To Lam, the absence of close-up shots of Xi in the welcome ceremony, which was broadcast live on CCTV, still confused the public. An article published by Radio Free Asia on August 20th analyzed that after being invisible for 3 weeks, Xi Jinping chose to make a glorious appearance in the diplomatic ceremony to welcome To Lam. In fact, both China and Vietnam had their own plans. China's recent economic recovery has been weak, and it faces many international challenges. Xi Jinping's graceful reception of To Lam can demonstrate the achievements of so-called Chinese-style modernization and strengthen China's attractiveness to countries in the global south. Xi also reiterated that the two countries will continue to deepen the strategically important China-Vietnam community with a shared future. China is the destination for your first overseas visit after taking office as General Secretary of the CPV Central Committee, which fully reflects the great importance you attach to the relations between the two parties and the two countries. As the ruling communist parties in the world today, the Communist Party of China and the Communist Party of Vietnam, should adhere to the original intention of friendship, continue our traditional friendship, remember our common mission, maintain Communist Party leadership and socialism, and continuously deepen the China-Vietnam community with a shared future that carries strategic significance, promote the development of the world's socialist cause, and I believe our path will be growing even broader. The newly appointed To Lam was not the successor chosen by the late former General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, Nguyen Phu Trong. Therefore, after taking office, he must immediately demonstrate his political achievements. Being invited to visit China has become a good publicity opportunity. According to a Reuters report on August 19th, at the meeting, To Lam said China has always been regarded as the strategic choice and top priority of Vietnam's foreign policy. After the meeting, the leaders of China and Vietnam also signed 14 agreements, including agreements on railways, central bank cooperation, and trade. This is my first trip since I was elected General Secretary of the CPV Central Committee and my first visit to China since my election, which fully reflects the importance that the party and state of Vietnam have always attached to the relationship with China. We have always viewed China as a strategic choice and top priority of Vietnam's foreign policy. Together with the senior leadership of the Vietnamese party and government, I am very willing to continuously foster the traditional friendship with General Secretary and President Xi Jinping, as well as the leading officials of both party and government of China, to further deepen and enhance the comprehensive strategic cooperative partnership. As a comrade and brother, we are always interested in and concerned about every step of China's development. We emphasize once again that Vietnam firmly adheres to the One China policy and that Taiwan is an inalienable part of China's territory. It's worth noting that Xi Jinping had an extraordinary relationship with the late General Secretary of the Communist Party of Vietnam, Nguyen Phu Trong. Nguyen was also the first foreign head of state to visit mainland China since the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China, when Xi was re-elected as General Secretary of the Communist Party of China and began his third 5-year term. When Xi Jinping visited Vietnam in December 2023, he also held another meeting with Nguyen Phu Trong. Nguyen said that this visit would become a new historical milestone in promoting the relations between Vietnam and China and the two parties to a new level. At that time, Xi Jinping called Nguyen an old friend and a good friend. The two sides also announced that they would work together to build a strategically significant China-Vietnam community with a shared future based on deepening the China-Vietnam Comprehensive Strategic Cooperative Partnership. Nguyen Phu Trong passed away on July 19th, and Xi personally went to the Vietnamese embassy to express his condolences on the 20th. Xi walked to the portrait of Nguyen Phu Trong, paused for a moment of silence, bowed 3 times to the portrait, and then left a message and signed his name on the condolence book. Xi Jinping said, "Comrade Nguyen Phu Trong and I have had close exchanges for more than 10 years and have forged a profound comradeship. What is a landmark is that last year we jointly announced the establishment of the China-Vietnam community with a shared future of strategic significance. With the passing of Nguyen Phu Trong, we have lost a promoter of China-Vietnam relations and a fellow traveler in the case of socialism, which makes us very sad." Later, Xi also appointed Wang Huning, a member of the political bureau of the CPC Central Committee, as his representative to go to Hanoi, Vietnam on July 25th to express his condolences to Nguyen Phu Trong. When Wang Huning met with the new Vietnamese president To Lam, he said, "The Communist Party of China firmly supports the Communist Party of Vietnam and supports Vietnam's reform, opening up, and socialist construction. China is willing to work with Vietnam to implement the important consensus reached by Xi Jinping during his visit to Vietnam last year and promote the solid advancement and sustainable development of the construction of the China-Vietnam community with a shared future." So what is the relationship between China and Vietnam? In December 2023, the BBC published an article reporting that China and Vietnam have a love-hate relationship. In 2022, Nguyen Phu Trong visited Beijing and received the highest medal awarded by China to foreign dignitaries. In December 2023, Xi Jinping also visited Vietnam and described China-Vietnam relations as comrades and brothers. China and Vietnam are very close neighbors connected by mountains and rivers. However, Vietnam has given a lukewarm response to the question of whether to join the community with a shared future for mankind proposed by Xi Jinping. The so-called Community of a Shared Future for Mankind is a China-centric concept primarily based on symbolism and is widely seen as a challenge to the US-led global order. The leaders of the two countries are also unwilling to discuss in public the fierce territorial dispute between the two countries over the South China Sea Islands, and the tense relations between China and Vietnam in the 1970s and 1980s, including a full-scale border war in 1979 that killed thousands of soldiers on both sides. Of course, China's long history of colonization of Vietnam will not be mentioned, let alone Vietnam's dissatisfaction with the impact of China's construction of dams on the Mekong River. In recent years, anti-China protests have occurred frequently in Vietnam. In 2014, China caused riots after deploying an oil drilling platform in what Vietnam considers its territorial waters, resulting in many deaths and the destruction of dozens of foreign-owned factories. A few years ago, some shops appeared in Hanoi, promising to sell only goods made in Vietnam, not China. Vietnam is particularly concerned about the expansion of China's influence in the South China Sea. Since the 1970s, ships from these two countries have had many conflicts in the area due to competition for islands and oil and gas reserves. Since May 2023, Vietnam has frequently issued protests due to the activities of the Chinese scientific research ship in the South China Sea. Vietnam has also been reluctant to accept Chinese investment under Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative, partly because they could stoke Vietnamese resentment about China's economic footprint. However, China is Vietnam's largest trading partner and largest source of foreign direct investment. The annual bilateral trade volume is close to $200 billion. No Vietnamese leader dares to risk disruption regardless of public opinion about China. According to Chinese official data, Vietnam exported more than 490,000 tons of durian to China in 2023, an increase of 1,100% from the previous year, worth approximately US $2.1 billion. Now we have about 50 containers in operation, and we plan to deploy a total of 300 containers. Currently, the 50 containers are running at full capacity. None are idle. More importantly, both Xi Jinping and Nguyen Phu Trong are hardliners deeply influenced by the respective parties' authoritarian ideologies. They are scornful of Western democratic values and determined to maintain their party's iron-fisted control of political life. But after all, there are huge differences in their strategic visions. China is an emerging superpower determined to challenge the US-led post-Cold War unipolar order and exert dominant influence in the region. Vietnam is a medium-sized country determined to gain as much benefit and security as possible by balancing its relations with its two rivals, China and the US. In addition, Vietnam has historically had close relations with Russia, and it still attaches great importance to Moscow. Nguyen Phu Trong called his foreign policy bamboo diplomacy. It's a flexible foreign policy that hopes to turn enemies into friends with all countries and obtain the most favorable conditions for Vietnam. This is in line with Vietnam's Four No's policy, not participating in military alliances, not uniting one country against another, not allowing foreign governments to establish military bases in Vietnam, and not resorting to force in international relations. Few countries play such a key role in the great power competition between China and the US as Vietnam, which puts this country that has fought tenaciously and long for independence into a high-risk, high-return situation. Satisfying both major powers, China and the US, could bring transformative growth to their economies, while anchoring one could come at a high cost. For the Vietnamese government, this is a very delicate deal. They have to walk on a very thin tightrope, and the rope is getting thinner and thinner. Although Vietnam's policy is to turn enemies into friends with all countries, it requires the existence of US aircraft carriers and high-speed rail connections with China. The goal is to maintain the balance of power between China and the US. However, China does not see it that way. Beijing believes that upgrading relations between Vietnam and the US is to hedge China's influence and dominance in the region. On June 25, 2023, the USS Ronald Reagan, a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, visited Da Nang, an important town in central Vietnam. This was its third visit since the end of the Vietnam War, and it triggered widespread concern and alarm in Beijing. During his visit to Hanoi in September, U.S. President Joe Biden unexpectedly upgraded U.S.-Vietnam relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership. This puts Washington on the same level as Beijing in Vietnam's carefully crafted hierarchy of international partners. Some analysts say that after China's rise, the U.S. and Vietnam not only have increasingly closer economic and trade relations, but also share common concerns about Beijing's military expansion in the South China Sea. Vietnam has always protested against China's sovereignty claims in the South China Sea. Suzy Yoon, a researcher at Taiwan's official think tank, National Defense Security Research Institute, analyzed, "From a geostrategic perspective, Vietnam is the last piece of the puzzle to encircle China. The strategy during the Trump era was to win over Vietnam and North Korea to encircle China at close range. During the Biden era, it was to abandon North Korea and focus on consolidating South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and the Philippines. Therefore, Vietnam has become the last piece of Biden's geopolitical puzzle. Vietnam's strategic attitude is to play the American card and may even accept American military aid. Therefore, Hanoi's win over the US to check and balance China while allowing its former colonial power, France, to send military aircraft to visit and station for a short period is obviously a power balancing strategy. Judging from these analyses, the US hopes to upgrade its relations with Vietnam this year from the third diplomatic level in Hanoi to the second level. China, India, Russia, and South Korea are at the first level. So has Vietnam turned to a pro-US and anti-China path because of the South China Sea issue? The answer is not necessarily. Washington is eager to win over Hanoi but has not succeeded. It's impossible to achieve the goal under Beijing's influence. While the US is Vietnam's main investor and its largest export market, China is Vietnam's largest trading partner and crucial to Vietnam's manufacturing industry. Reuters quoted Vietnamese officials as saying that although the US hopes to upgrade diplomatic relations with Vietnam, it's largely symbolic because Vietnam's leaders have always been hesitant, fearing that China may retaliate. For senior leaders of the Vietnamese Communist Party, maintaining the regime is the top priority. China and the Philippines have disputed sovereignty over islands, reefs, and waters in the South China Sea for many years, but conflicts between the two sides have continued to escalate since this year. In January this year, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s state visit to Vietnam signed 2 agreements in Hanoi to strengthen cooperation between the two countries' coast guards and prevent unpleasant incidents in the South China Sea. On August 5th, the Vietnamese Coast Guard ship arrived at the port of the Philippine capital to launch the first joint Coast Guard exercise between the two countries. This is definitely not the outcome Xi Jinping wants to see. This is very important as we are building a partnership and want to show that it's possible for two countries to work together despite both having problems in the West Philippine Sea. It's possible to come up with a template where we can build a stronger relationship, and maybe we could apply it as well with other countries who have the same claims as ours. It's possible to get along, it's possible to have talks, it's possible to de-escalate the situation through these kinds of activities. On August 9th, Vietnamese ships conducted a training exercise with the Philippines' 83-meter-long offshore patrol vessel during a 5-day port call. This is the first exercise between the two Southeast Asian countries, which have long disputed sovereignty over parts of the South China Sea and have clashed with China's Coast Guard on disputed waterways. Let's wait and see where China-Vietnam relations will go in the future.